107 days. She didn't even campaign. They just kind of, it was a coronation more than anything else. It's a coronation. We've picked her for you, and you will do as we are instructing you to do and vote for her because, look, we have LeBron James and we have Beyonce, and that's what you know to do. And Taylor
Cook, Candace, cook.
Swift gives you a post. I think ultimately they insulted a lot of their voters.
Yeah, I mean, Marc Lamont Hill, I really feel that this time.
Cardi B, let alone read off this phone and butcher up this whole endorsement.
Jennifer Lopez lecturing Latinos that this is, you can't vote for this guy. Or
Fat Joe.
Barack Obama telling black voters, you've got to vote for the black candidate. Oprah, George Clooney, out they come, as they did for Hillary Clinton, but it didn't work for her, and it didn't work for Kamala Harris. And I do feel like Candace just said, I felt it actively deterred people. I think it drove them to go and vote against what they saw as a kind of...
Hey, no, Piers Morgan, man, he rubbed me the wrong way because of that Bassem Youssef interview. But, Piers Morgan, he's just doing his job. No riff with him. But that's actually a good point. That turned a lot of people away. I've just made some posts on my Instagram. Make sure to give us a follow. But a lot of people, I live in Arizona, so a lot of my audience is predominantly Hispanic. And they agreed with that because Stephen A. Smith used the Disneyland analogy when it comes to immigration and how the Latino community views that. And that was a very interesting perspective.
Celebrity multimillionaire elite. What do you think of that?
Well, you guys made a few points I'd like to respond to. First, I don't know if celebrity culture or in the wave of celebrities deterred people from voting. I'd rather rely on the data for that. And until I see the data on that, I don't want to make a determination. I think that voters in general want to be spoken to about policy issues. I think they want to be engaged about the things that matter in their lives. But Barack Obama also had a ton of celebrities, and it did work. I think if people like you, celebrities are an added bonus. If they don't like you,
yeah, but we watched this. I'm sorry, this is the Cardi B. Yeah, we watched this be butchered
Good day
up
to my American friends.
Completely. This was crazy. We watched this, all of us.
My success belittled.
Like what?
Once you celebrities hurt, I don't think that's the issue here. I think more fundamentally, the question of whether you should vote for somebody because you're black or because you're a woman or whatever is a little more complicated than has been suggested. I think that the message that I would give to somebody is never vote to support somebody because they're black, right? I would never vote for a candidate because they're black, but I will vote for a candidate because I'm black. In other words, I will vote for a candidate that speaks to my interests. And I think it's okay to say to people, hey, there are some things that affect your community, and this candidate is
Does
better.
Trump not speak to our interests? No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, getting fentanyl off these streets. The rich people don't need overtime. The rich people aren't worried about tips.
For you, the problem is we should not presume that...
Shout out Marc Lamont Hill, man. Well said. Shout out JBP.
Someone is the same race as you or the same gender as you, that they have your community's best interest at heart. I do think in the case of Kamala Harris, though, an interesting thing happened, right? They were basically saying women's reproductive rights are on the table. If you specifically are pro-abortion, you should be voting for Kamala Harris because that's your only chance at saving what has already been a devastating loss. I think that is logical. If you support abortion, Donald Trump ain't the guy to vote for based on what he said and based on what Kamala Harris has said. I think, though, what we saw in America, and what we always see in America, is that white people in general, in terms of the majority, are not going to vote for a Democrat. No Democrat has gotten the majority of white voters since like LBJ. It's been decades. And so ultimately, white people often don't vote their interests. Black people often don't vote their interests. And I think that's the problem. And that's what many of us get so frustrated.
But I had a fascinating conversation with an African-American woman, I guess in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, yesterday. And she voted Trump for the first time. And I said, why? And she said, it's interesting. So I grew up in a family where you just would automatically vote for a black presidential candidate, if there was one, Barack Obama, and now Kamala Harris. And she said that was how my family
Phoenix
worked.
Fireside, welcome back.
This time that I didn't care about the fact she was a woman or that she was
Blessed
black.
to have you.
I cared about what she was going to do for my personal finances, what she was going to do about the border, what she was going to do about all these things. And she talked about a number of issues. And it was really interesting. She said, I voted, she said, I was almost colorblind when I voted. I didn't care that she looked like me. I cared about what she could do for me. And I wonder, given how many black voters gravitated to Trump this time, and given particularly how many Latinos did, how many of them were having that same conversation with themselves, saying they may not even like him that much. She wasn't a particular fan of Trump's, but she just was put off by the kind of posturing of people to try and direct you to vote according to your ethnicity.
Yeah. It's fundamentally just not educated to vote for someone and say, well, this person looks like me, so that means that they have my best interests at heart. I just think it's the most...
Cardi B literally pandered the best way you can. I'm talking about phone in hand, national TV. I'm talking about the whole ratchet attitude. I'm talking about singing, screaming, the whole 9 yards. And people as Democrats, young people, were supposed to look at that and be like, yeah, no, we're with that. I'm totally represent. I align with that. That's my identity. No, man. I know we see the TikTok era, but some of us aren't just doom scrolling all day. Some of us could read between the lines, you know? Phoenix Fireside, welcome back.
Educated thing you could possibly do. And it's especially rich when you have someone, because Mark, you just said, I maybe wouldn't vote for them because they're black, but I might vote for them because I'm black, right? And I might think that their interests align. I hope I'm paraphrasing that correctly, but the reality is even that fundamentally makes no sense. LeBron James, just because he is black, is not living the black experience of somebody who might be living on the south side of Chicago. It's actually insulting when LeBron James posts something, and you saw this in the comments, by the way. If we could use any metric, it was the fact that LeBron James had to start hiding comments because the overwhelming majority of them were negative when he made a post, and that was very propagandist. He was using things that Trump said and splicing it and behind clips of the civil rights movement. It made entirely no sense. It was offensive level of propaganda. You have a man who lives in a $100 million Bel Air mansion, okay?
Cook, Candace.
He does not touch his own door handles, okay? So when he tells you about how he's worried about the future for his children, this man is so wealthy and so connected that he has a son who quite literally is not qualified in terms of his actual metrics to be playing for the Lakers. But because of good old-fashioned nepotism, he is playing for the Lakers besides his father, because they thought, well, good advertisement, a father and a son playing.
No comment. It's legendary to see a father and son in the NBA, but ooh-wee, Candace.
You know? And so when you see that taking place and this person pretending to be in the struggle, that's why I said Barack Obama exiting his mansion in Martha's Vineyard to come down and roll up his sleeves and speak to the brothers, it does resonate as insulting. And so at the end of the day, people were moved by, okay, you know what? Despite what the media rhetoric is about Trump, how am I actually living right now? And I know they're going to say, well, these statistics show, and they've released this. When I was living under Trump, the gas was low. I was able to afford gas. I was able to afford groceries. And everything the media told me the first time around about him being Adolf Hitler and telling me that he was going to put me back into slave chains didn't come true, right? It didn't come true. I already survived under Trump and I was living better. And so there was this common sense element, and I knew that that was going to happen. And it's beautiful to see. It's beautiful to see people say, I'm not going to respond to that sort of a rhetoric anymore. I'm not going to vote because I'm a woman or because I'm black, but I'm going to vote what actually makes sense.
Yeah, Mark, you're shaking your head a lot there. Why?
Well, to the first point, Candace, you may not have heard the second part of what I said. I said, I vote for someone because I'm black. I said, but I also added, I don't presume that because someone shares my color that they represent my interests. So I don't assume that the black person is the best person to represent the black community, or that the woman is the best person to represent women's interests. I added that part as well. So we're actually not in disagreement there. I think it's really important to look at the agenda. I have voted in the past for old white men, old white ladies. I didn't vote for Barack Obama when he was on the ticket in 2008 as a Green Party member, because I thought that the white woman who was running against him, or at that point, a black woman,
Pretend like you don't see none.
better chance of meeting my issues. I voted for Jill Stein instead of Hillary Clinton. There have been moments where I don't make that alignment, but I do think we have to vote based on our collective community interests. I think it's interesting, though, that to say someone like LeBron James can't speak for the conditions of a poor person or the everyday black experience of the person struggling in America. If we make that argument, because he's a near billionaire, if not a billionaire, then it would be really hard to make the argument that Trump has the ability to speak for the average Joe. It's sort of interesting that Trump's whole candidacy, his whole campaign has been based on saying, look, his whole candidacy is saying, his whole campaign has said, look, I know what is best to heal America. The people who are working in factories, when he goes down to places like Ohio or Pennsylvania, I've literally stood there, as he said, I can get you back working again. I know what you're going through, and I can fix the economy for you. And hear me out. Yes. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying that if you have $1 billion, you might be able to do that, although I hate billionaires. And if you have no money, you might be representing the interests of the rich. Again, we can't assume a one-to-one correlation between people's own identity and status and what they're representing, because when we do that, we make a lot of dangerous assumptions. So I'm not going to reject LeBron James because he's rich. I'm going to reject him if I were to, because I don't agree with his argument, similar to Donald Trump. I happen to agree with LeBron James, though, in this particular case, that Donald Trump did not best represent the interests of the people. But while I don't think identity politics should govern our decision-making process, I also don't want us to be naive either as a nation. I don't want us to assume that nobody rejected Kamala Harris because of her womanness, or nobody rejected Kamala Harris because of her blackness. And the reason why I say that is because when we look at the campaign...
we rejected Kamala Harris speaking for the young people. I mean, on this platform alone, we reached 4 million people in the last 2 weeks. The young people, we noticed that when we saw Donald Trump and Joe Rogan sit down for 3 hours, we noticed that this is an actual human. We've seen his train of thought. We've seen how his ideas formulate. We were never able to see that with Kamala. Unfortunately, we've only seen a teleprompter. We've only seen her read it off scripts, right? And so that was a very a key indicator of who we're voting for, of understanding the personality we're voting for. And for someone like my age, 25 and younger, when you've heard the same political rhetoric for the last 20, 30 years, and you finally have someone saying what they actually mean and saying who they are and saying their true beliefs, it's very refreshing.
Trail. When we look at the surrogates for Trump and other people, or people who just don't like either of them, but are still calling Kamala Harris a whore or a slut or the N-word. I mean, these are things that absolutely suggest that misogyny and misogynoir play into it.
Candace, you want to respond?
Yeah, if I may respond. First and foremost, Trump has never tried to say I am a blue collar worker. So that's just completely wrong. He actually leans into the fact that he is. Well, you correlated him to LeBron James, and you said, well, he does the exact same thing that LeBron James is doing. No, LeBron James pretends that he is living a struggle. Trump does not. Trump says, I'm rich, I run a company, and I can help you get rich. He literally makes jokes about the fact that he's rich when he's at these events, and he's tossing jokes about, I'm a billionaire, I've done
It is a little bit of a reach to say that Bron's pretending to live in a struggle. We all know he comes from a single-parent household, and we all watched his movie and his documentary as to the struggle him and his mother faced. But to say that he's pretending, I don't. That's a little bit of a reach. But what do you guys think?
Like, he is the New York City stereotype billionaire who basically says, I run businesses and I'm going to run this country like a business and I'm going to lift you up. And I understand how trade works because I've been running a business. So I just fully reject that he's somehow cosplaying a blue collar worker. Blue collar workers are responding to him because he speaks in a way that they believe that he's going to uplift them. That's great. I'm happy we agree on that point, but you did try to correlate him to LeBron James 5 seconds ago. And that's just not the truth. But to respond to your point, because this has really bothered me, people pretending that those who have told the truth about the fact that Kamala Harris did sleep with Willie Brown and was not warranted to the position that she has, district attorney, pretending that this came up because she's running for president or because there's some element of misogyny. That is patently false. It was actually leftist newspapers at the time that she was running in Los Angeles. I pulled up these old articles in the San Francisco Chronicle who were scandalized. They felt that it was a scandal that she was being given so much power, that she was being put on boards that she did not deserve to be put on, and that she was being given those positions and making all that money not based on her merit, but because she was having an affair with Willie Brown. Again, these were the leftist San Francisco articles that were covering it at this time. You can go back, way back machine it, and read those articles yourself. So people point to the fact that she was essentially coronated because of who she was sleeping with in the past, and then now is essentially just being handed another position, not because people voted for her. I think it's relevant to the discussion of whether or not she is qualified for that position. That's fine. And the last thing I'll say is that I found it to be really alarming and borderline satanic in the manner that they ran to women and said, well, this is the election that hinges upon abortion. And I am not saying this even as a critique of people that are pro-choice. I actually think they moved away from pro-choice. They went like pro-death. It was very bizarre. It wasn't like, the typical we are pro-choice and you are pro-life. They essentially were coming to women, and their only basis for saying to vote for her is, well, the only thing women could possibly care about is whether or not we have the authority to, murder our offspring. I don't think that actually resonated even on the left. They're not that radical on the topic of abortion to make your entire platform hinge upon it. And I think that's the reason why so many people who otherwise are okay with the pro-choice movement, we also saw in those exit polls, moved away. Women moved away totally from the Democratic platform. I think it was a big mistake to hinge an entire election upon the topic of abortion in the way that they did.
Yeah, Mark, before you respond to that, what I would say about that, and I was discussing this on a BBC interview last night, is it seemed to me there was a real inconsistency, if not hypocrisy. On the one hand, Kamala Harris wanted to make the whole thing about, I represent women's rights, vote for me and I'll protect women's rights, and using abortion as her reason for that and bringing back abortion rights and so on. And that's fine, except that at the same time, she has also been actively promoting the issue, for example, of trans athletes in women's sport, which most people can see is an erosion of women's rights. It's unfair, it's unequal. Last week, the United Nations said that 900 medals have been deprived from women athletes by trans athletes competing against them, which is obviously completely outrageous. And we saw the scenes in Paris where boxers with male chromosomes were literally beating up women in front of the world. I mean, the whole thing was grotesque. I don't know how the Democrats could consistently say to women, we are here for protecting women's rights, when at the same time they're advocating a direct attack on women's rights.
Yeah, I want to respond to the point that Candace made prior. Again, it wasn't me pivoting or shifting my position. I wasn't suggesting that Donald Trump or LeBron James were cosplaying. I'm saying that neither is cosplaying. I think my point is not that LeBron James is a legitimate poor person. My point is he's a rich person who is able to speak to the experience of a poor person, someone who was dirt poor at one point, and now he's pivoted. That's what I'm saying he's doing. And I'm saying no matter what class position you're in, if your politics are right, then you can speak to the issue. That's all I'm saying. I was never suggesting the thing that you were representing me to have been saying. It sounds like it was just a miscommunication. I actually don't disagree with you on the big point. As far as the race piece of this, or the misogyny piece of this, pointing to a left-wing newspaper and saying, well, look, it's not misogyny. A left-wing newspaper was questioning this. Left-wing newspapers are misogynist. Democrats are misogynist. misogyny isn't a right-wing problem. It's a universal problem. So just because it's in a left-wing newspaper doesn't nullify
But it's a
the
valid
claim or negate.
critique. I'm sorry to cut you off. I don't like to cut you off, but I just want to say, do you not think it's a valid critique if somebody is given a job, not because they're qualified, but quite literally because they are sleeping with someone who gave them the position, which, like I said, caused a firestorm at that time? Do you not think it's a valid critique to say, well, they weren't even qualified to be the DA, and now all of a sudden they're trying to tell you that they're qualified to be the president of the United States? Don't you think that's a valid critique, setting aside misogyny?
If that were the point I was making, I would agree with you. But that wasn't the point. That was an example you gave that wasn't responsive to the point I was making. I'm saying right now, as she's running for president, there are people saying she's unqualified for the office. I think it's much more of a reasonable question to raise. 20 years ago when she's running for DA, I didn't take issue with that, right? Although I don't know enough about the Willie Brown situation to speak to it. If what you're saying is true, then yeah, you should question that. But I'm saying right now in 2024, after serving as vice president, after serving in the U.S. Senate, after serving as a district attorney, after having all of these jobs, state attorney general, I don't think qualification is the right thing to raise. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, I don't think she's good at this. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say,
what about the point?
Different issue.
Let's move to
the trans point. To the trans point.
Yes.
What's the trans point? To the trans point, I don't think it's a contradiction for Democrats to do that unless they accept the terms of your argument. Let me be clear. If you think that trans women are not women, then yes, it would be a violation of women's rights to say that trans women should be boxing. I happen to believe.
I'm sorry. Mark.
I need to finish. No. I insist on finishing this point because I will not be cut off and misrepresented. But let me make the point.
Okay.
I happen to believe that biological males should not participate in women's sports. I am fine taking that position. Yeah, that's my point. Sometimes if you hear me out, you realize we're not even debating. But there are many Democrats who don't take that position. There are many people on the left who believe that, and let me be clear, I think trans women are women. I just think sports are divided in a very particular way. In 8th grade, we make a decision that we need to divide sports up by gender or by sex, right? Because we believe that there's something fundamentally different about biological boys and biological girls that say we shouldn't be running on the same track team. We shouldn't be boxing each other. I'm okay with that argument. I agree with that argument. I don't want to speak for Candace, but I suspect she agrees with me on this, and I suspect you agree with me on that. So we're not in disagreement on that. But just because I have that position doesn't mean that everyone who disagrees with me is being a hypocrite, because they don't begin from the same premise that I begin from. That's all I'm saying. So I don't think it's contradictory.
Hang on. All right, hang on. But what other premise could there possibly be? The bottom line is these are people who were born biological males who are competing against biological females, and there's a reason why we don't do that in sport. It's why the Olympics have always separated the sexes, because the truth is, if they didn't, women wouldn't win any medals.
Look, I mean, listen, I know that
I think what you should do is bring someone in who has the position that you're trying to debate. Instead, it's like you're trying to force a debate with me on something that we agree on. So bring on somebody who has the opposite position, and they can speak for that. But what I'm saying is that
I just wanted to add here, like, just to say where we do actually differentiate, like trans women are absolutely not women. And that's why we're playing the crazy game right now, is because we have people that are trying to parse reality and say, well, I believe trans women are women, but they're also biological men. Like the fact that we are calling them trans women, it is because they are not women. I am a woman, and no matter how you feel on the inside, you are never going to be a woman. And that disagreement, that fundamental disagreement, is the reason why we are playing the crazy game. I won't play it. I will not address a man that isn't addressed as a woman. It's insulting to me. It's insulting to the things that actual women live through in their lives. And you can play Halloween, you can put lipstick on a pig. It is still a pig, and it is just Halloween. So I just feel very strongly about that, and I wanted to make that clear. And that this is a large part, though, Piers, going back to your point of why, because my sisters were on the left, and this is the first election that they voted for Trump. They're from Connecticut, dyed-in-the-wool Democrats, I guess you could say, and they moved away. And the trans issue was the number one reason that they did.
Yeah.
What they said was happening in the school system made them fearful. They have sons. They thought it was completely crazy and bizarre that they're insisting upon trying to make toddlers. My sisters have toddlers believe that they can be anything that they want and that they're non-binary. They truly believe the left has gone crazy. And they say, I didn't leave the left left me. And that is an accurate statement to make, because they cannot just see things that are just so plainly obvious. They're trying to criminalize the idea that a woman is a woman, and you can't just become a woman because you feel a certain way on the inside. And the right, like I'm doing right now, I will just say it as it is, right? You are not a woman. I am sorry that you are suffering from a mental disorder. If you were suffering from any other mental disorder, I would treat you the same way. I want you to get better. But because you are suffering from a mental disorder does not mean that I have to pretend that I have a mental disorder and that I see things differently. I don't.
I mean, Mark, I'll let you respond directly to what Candace says there. Well, let me just point out one thing. Let me just point out one thing. There was a New York Times report today that said that one of the most effective Trump ads during the presidential race towards the end was the one where he had Kamala Harris saying, she'll call you they, them, I'll call you, you, or whatever it was. And that turned out to be, to the Trump campaign team's surprise, one of their most effective ads of the whole race, apparently, which suggests it is a much bigger issue than some Democrats clearly want people to think. I saw Joe Scarborough on this yesterday, very vocal, saying this trans issue has gone completely wrong. The Democrats should not be supporting this kind of thinking. And Bill Clinton, apparently, according to the New York Times, he directly tried to get the Democrats and Kamala Harris and her team to understand that they had to come out against this, but they didn't. And that is, I think, a big problem. Particularly, as I say, the reason I think it's a big problem is if at the same time you're trying to say I'm the person protecting women's rights. One of the reasons why so many women didn't vote for her may be because they just didn't buy it. Sorry, if you did, you wouldn't allow this.
I'll respond to all those points. I think they're interesting points. I think, one, I'm not sure anyone, and again, I need to see the data to speak to this, just as we all should. I don't think anyone is voting for the president based on this issue. It could be an issue that tips the scale, but I think most people aren't voting for president based on this issue. I just don't think it's the priority issue of most people.
Mothers are.
I do. Again, they may be. I'd like to see the evidence of that. I can't say definitively one way or the other, but it's never happened before in any election, so this would be the first time. So if it's true, just show me the evidence, and I'm happy to learn from it. But to the bigger point here, I think that we can say, when I say woman, I'm including cisgender women, I'm including transgender women. When I say women, I'm including all of their experiences. When I want to protect women, I don't just want to
This season, give the gift of joy with holiday scratchers from the Arizona Lottery.
protect cisgender women, I want to protect transgender women. When it comes to sports, for me, it's about a competitive advantage. If someone were a cisgender woman, which we've seen before, that had high levels of testosterone, but were not trans, just had high levels of testosterone and gave a competitive advantage, I would say they also should not compete. It's not their transness, it's about keeping a level playing field. And I believe, as a general rule, and there might be some exceptions, but as a general rule, a person who is a trans woman in particular, we see this actually on the converse, when trans male boxers attempt to compete with cis male boxers, the trans women lose. They lose badly. And honestly, I worry about their safety and their health. So it's not a safe playing field. But that doesn't mean that to acknowledge the womanness and the humanity and the fundamental dignity and legitimacy of trans identities is to play make-believe or to play fairy tales. I think we can acknowledge their humanity. And most Democrats, I think, who I speak to, and again, I'm not a Democrat, but I'm on the left. Most Democrats, I think, share the position I have. I don't think most people, at least in my neighborhood, my community, I'll talk about black people in particular, think that trans folks should be playing in sports, right? In ways that create competitive disadvantage.
Well, let's agree on that central point.
They recognize and
just to be, okay, hang on. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left. Candace,
I feel so strongly about this. Yeah, I just feel strongly about this.
I think you made your point strongly. I just want to ask you, with just a few minutes left, what do you want Trump to do? He's got an incredible mandate here. What would you like to see him do, Candace, to really transform America in a positive way?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that he promised he would do. Secure the borders. I want him to get the illegals out of this country. It fundamentally is hurting the workers, particularly the blue-collar workers, is hurting Black Americans. It's why you saw men moving away from this. And obviously, Latinos are upset about it as well. To try to conflate being a legal Latino citizen with being an illegal, I think is something that has been upsetting to people. I very much want him to go after the deep state. I know I saw Piers that you tweeted, and many people have this sentiment, like, we should take the high road now. We should walk away from this. We shouldn't go after Hunter Biden. I think it's the exact opposite. He took the high road in his first time that he was in office, and look what they did to him afterwards. We need to root out this corruption and truly go after the Department of Justice, because if they will do this to a sitting president, how safe does an American feel? I want him to instantly, on first day in the office, to take care of Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. To issue them both pardons. And I want to make sure that the people that are around him do a very good job at deregulating this economic environment. I look forward to seeing what RFK Jr. does to the CDC. He has been on to them for a very long time, absolutely collapsed Big Pharma, what they did throughout COVID, the bureaucratic state that was a warning to what will come if we allow the state to continue to grow. And he's got to fundamentally shrink government, secure the borders, and root out the corruption of the Department of Justice and the deep state.
And Mark, we've got about a minute. What would you want him to do?
A bunch of stuff that he's not going to do. I'd love to see him hike the minimum wage to a living wage. I'd love to see him cut off funding to Israel. I'd love him to restore full funding to the Palestinian people through UNRWA, and in fact increase that funding. I'd love to see him sign a reparations agenda. I'd love to see universal health care for all. I'd love to see student debt forgiveness. I'd love to see him, jump back into all the international climate agreements that he's pulled out from in the past and commit to staying in them. And I'd love to see him have a humane border policy. We may disagree on what humane looks like, but we absolutely need one. So I'd love to see him do all that stuff. And if he does all that stuff, I will fight for a constitutional change to give him a third term.
You know what? If he does all that stuff, it's highly likely that the reason is he's transitioned into being Kamala Harris. And that ain't going to happen. Not on Trump's watch. Thank you both very much. Great debate. Appreciate it.
It's not what's under the tree that matters. It's who's around it.
Walk me through this. When does the day start
What's your day look like from the morning till midnight? What's the day look like for the Trump family?
Well, listen, guys, remember, outside of politics, and I'm heavily involved in politics, I also run a big company, so my day starts early, and we're not much, we're not big sleepers in our family. My father's not a big sleeper. I'm not a big sleeper. I'm normally 5 a.m. guy. Go to the gym, get to it, very, very early, and getting very late. And the last 2 nights we've come in at 1 o'clock in the morning, and come back from big fundraisers, big events. I was with him all over Georgia, North Carolina. I've been doing events all over the country, and so no, guys, not a lot of sleep now between obviously kind of campaign schedule and the final 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks now, 12 days. And then obviously, the company, we've got some of the greatest hotels all over the world, and golf courses and residential buildings, commercial buildings, literally on every corner of the globe. And so not a whole lot of sleep in our family.
And you're the EVP, right? You're the EVP of the entire organization.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Okay,
that's
so question with you there, because I got 4 kids, and we got businesses that we're running. How was the family conversations when you guys were kids, younger?
Yeah.
Think 10, 12, 13, 14 years old, 15 years old. Hey, one day you're going to run this, and one day you're going to do that. What were those conversations like with Pops?
No, actually, almost the exact opposite of that. We were thrown on construction sites, Don and I, at a very, very young age, right? About 11, started making less than minimum wage, and I was pulling conduit, and I was doing HVAC work, tile work, concrete work, everything that you can possibly imagine, right? And I loved it, but it was, you're going to work with the stonemasons. These are guys, tough Italian guys. If you wore gloves, they would laugh at you. I mean, it's just, your little prepubescent hands are going to get, work hard in today, little boy. And, these,
so they were tough on you guys.
Oh, these guys are freaking tough. Yeah. I mean, these guys are no bullshit, right? They're, these are the real deal. These are hardened, tough guys. And, by the way, so many of them still work in the company today and dear friends and worked for us forever. And they're really kind of family of ours. But no, this is real deal stuff. And, if you wanted a fishing rod, guess what? Honey, go out and work for it. Go dig a hole, go learn how to, run backhoes, bulldozers, chainsaws. And it's what we did every single summer. And it was the best thing that ever happened. And so I don't think there was any, hey, when you come into the business, it's work, earn it, and slowly grow your way in the company. And if you're really good at what you do, you can eventually have, the keys. And I don't even think that was stated. It was one of these things that we went out and we busted our butts every single day. And trust me, Donald Trump, right? He's no pushover. If we weren't really good at what we did, if we didn't care, if we didn't work our tail off, we wouldn't be in the seat that we were in. Okay, I mean, there's no way. There's too much riding on it.
Two questions with that. So when I studied the Kennedy family, specifically Joseph Kennedy, right? And even Michael Jordan, when he hears stories about him when he was younger, his older brother, the dad, would pin them against each other, competition. And Michael in The Last Dance, I don't know what scene it was, when he says, when I was a kid and I was going through it, and my dad was saying, you don't know what to do. You don't know how to compete. You just go play outside. Let us grown men do this. And he said, I wanted to kill these guys, right? My own, the level of competition. He says, but I realized I needed to go through that phase of getting my skin to be thick before I became who I was. Was dad doing that, or did he leave it to everybody else to do it?
There was definitely friendly competition between Don, Ivanka, and I. We're closest friends. We're inseparable, right? I mean, we have a really inseparable family. No division, which is actually hard to believe going through the political nonsense, right? I mean, they've done everything they could to kind of break up the family and divide us and pin everybody against each other. But what he was actually remarkable at, he almost took a different approach. He'd give you tasks that were so insurmountable. You realize he kind of laddered them, right? But I was 24 years old. I'd get thrown into build that building, and by the way, it's you're in charge. Make good decisions. I'd go to him oftentimes. Hey, I've got a problem. What's the answer? And he would kind of talk in a little bit of a circle, but then at the end of his, you figure it out. You figure it out. And don't get me wrong, if I was going to go grossly awry, he would have, course corrected immediately. But he wanted people. For him, it was never about the PhDs. It was never about the resume. It was guys who would go out there and bust their butts, bust their asses, who worked, who had common sense, who people liked, who would go out there and fight. We have people in our company that were literally drivers. They took me to school as a kid, who were general managers of some of the biggest hotels in the country, because these guys always had their hand up. And Donald Trump was always this guy. You keep your hand in the air, right? I mean, driver. We were bringing architects out to Las Vegas when we did our big hotel out there, right? 64 stories on the Strip, right across from the Wynn. Amazing building. Hey, I'll take them out. This driver, I'll take the architects out, no problem. A couple weeks later, we're getting financing and we're going through the whole planning process. Hey, I'll take those bankers out. I'll show them site. I'll take them through the plans that we have. The guy always just had his hand up, and guess what? 15 years later, 20 years later, he's running a several $billion building that's one of the biggest in Las Vegas, and this is a guy who always started as a driver. And it was never about the guys who graduated from Yale and Princeton. It was about the guys who worked hard, who were no BS, who were honest, who were loyal, who always had their hand up, and very different. I mean, and by the way, one other thing, he instilled confidence in people who otherwise might have not had confidence in themselves, and he would build them up. Brian's the greatest. He does the greatest job. This guy works hard on everybody. Everybody loves this guy. You watch, this guy's going to get the project done on time, under budget. And he built up their personality where they actually believed in themselves, where otherwise they would have said, hey, I'm just not qualified for that. I mean, how many times have you heard that across your life? And when in reality, they were almost the most qualified, in a crazy way. They had the street smarts. They had now he was a remarkable guy. He's made so many careers, remarkable boss, but you better believe when we were 14 years old, it wasn't, hey, when you take over the company one day, no, go out and dig that damn hole and work for it.
I was in Vermont visiting this insurance company called National Life Group. and they were showing this person's been here for 38 years, this person's been here for 30 years, 28 years. Who are some of the longest standing employees within the organization, and what are the timelines?
Well, if you haven't been in our company for 20 years, you're like a, you're like a junior, very, very junior people. I mean, I always say, you make it the first year with us and we love you, you're in for life. And you walk down the hall of our company, every single person, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. I mean, it's a remarkable thing. And so many people who came through, I hate hiring from outside. I hate it. It drives me crazy because you can never learn who a person is on a resume. You just don't. And I'd much rather have somebody that started as a busboy and worked his way into kind of being an F&B director and then kind of worked his way into assistant general manager, and then you take that person, you put them in another property. They succeed every single time because their heart and soul, their work ethic, I mean, they've just been tested over and over and over. And by the way, they're the people who are most appreciative. I mean, think about the kind of FU it sends throughout corporate culture. When somebody's worked in a company for 15 years and they've rose the ranks, and then you jump ahead of them and you go grab some guy, some stiff from Ritz-Carlton or something along those lines, and you bring them in and you totally jump over them. I try never to do that. And my father was the same way. He always liked hiring from within.
How many people over 20 years, if you were to give a number?
Tens of thousands.
Wow.
I mean, listen, guys.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good day.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to it.
Here's my plan to dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. This is how I will shatter the deep state and restore government that is controlled by the people and for the people. Here's my plan to dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy from Washington corruption once and for all, and corruption it is. First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively. Second, we will clean out all of the corrupt actors in our national security and intelligence apparatus, and there are plenty of them. The departments and agencies that have been weaponized will be completely overhauled so that faceless bureaucrats will never again be able to target and persecute conservatives, Christians, or the left's political enemies, which they're doing now at a level that nobody can believe even possible. Third, we will totally reform FISA courts, which are so corrupt that the judges seemingly do not care when they are lied to in warrant applications. So many judges have seen so many applications that they know were wrong, or at least they must have known. They do nothing about it. They're lied to. Fourth, to expose the hoaxes and abuses of power that have been tearing our country apart, we will establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to declassify and publish all documents on deep state spying, censorship, and corruption, and there are plenty of them. Fifth, we will launch a major crackdown on government leakers who collude with the fake news to deliberately weave false narratives and to subvert our government and our democracy. When possible, we will press criminal charges. Sixth, we will make every Inspector General's office independent and physically separated from the departments they oversee so they do not become the protectors of the deep state. Seventh, I will ask Congress to establish an independent auditing system to continually monitor our intelligence agencies to ensure they are not spying on our citizens or running disinformation campaigns against the American people, or that they are not spying on someone's campaign like they spied on my campaign. Eighth, we will continue the effort launched by the Trump administration to move parts of the sprawling federal bureaucracy to new locations outside the Washington swamp. Just as I moved the Bureau of Land Management.
So this is, for the people that just joined us, this is Trump's plan to dismantle the deep state or the enemy within. Before we get back into the content, we have about 700 people. We're at 113 likes. We're trying to hit that 150 goal, 150 like goal. If y'all can help us out, that should be like 20, 30 of y'all out of 700 people. It's absolutely free to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It's this little thumbs up right near my face. So if y'all could do that, I'll give everyone a few seconds to do so before we get back to the content. Remember, again, it's absolutely free to support, so we appreciate y'all.
I will shatter the deep state and restore government that is controlled by the people and for the people. Here's my plan to dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy from Washington corruption once and for all, and corruption it is. First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively. Second, we will clean out all
you hear him? Very aggressively.
Corrupt actors in our national security and intelligence.
Because we are impatient for change.
Apparatus, and there are plenty of them. The departments and agencies that have been weaponized will be completely overhauled so that faceless bureaucrats will never again be able to target and persecute conservatives, Christians, or the left's political enemies, which they're doing now at a level that nobody can believe even possible. Third, we will totally reform FISA courts, which are so corrupt that the judges seemingly do not care when they are lied to in warrant applications. So many judges have seen so many applications that they know were wrong, or at least they must have known. They do nothing about it. They're lied to. Fourth, to expose the hoaxes and abuses of power that have been tearing our country apart, we will establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to declassify in public